Welcome to Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Doug Sharp.
Your co-host, Rich Gear, and we have a guest with us, Doug.
We have Derek Marshall with us.
Yes, Derek.
Hello. And he's going to come along and confuse us all the more.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, good stuff. I was telling him beforehand, he says, "Wow, you sure you want me to do the show?" It's kind of sounded kind of negative. I said, "No, I'm trying to let you know that I'm kind of an ignoramus when it comes to math stuff, and I really want to get it because the basic principle sounds really cool.
Yes,
you know, they're putting it all together."
Just kidding, Derek.
Yeah.
There's some really cool stuff here, and I appreciate the opportunity.
So what do you want to call the show?
Well, I want to call it the Tree of Life, the 7-Day Creation, and Fibonacci. Excuse me if I say Fibonacci. It's the way I've said it for a lot of years. It's actually Fibonacci. But I'd like to give you the take-home message of this first. You're going to get the good stuff first. And many of your audience may have heard of the Fibonacci Sequence or the Fibonacci Numbers,
right?
Maybe or maybe not. But what's usually said about them is that this series of numbers that keeps popping up all over creation, that they kind of identify and point towards a fingerprint of a creator or someone who is a designer that has created everything around us, because we keep seeing this group of numbers, the same group of numbers over and over again. And what I'd like to say is that's all well and good. We're good with that, but also we can say more about the sequence. Okay. I believe I found the sequence actually in Noah's Ark and mathematically derived it from the 7-day creative sequence.
Right, okay.
And,
so, can you explain to us what the Fibonacci series is and give us an example of how to recognize it in nature?
Yeah, how does it appear in nature?
Well, I'd like to adhere to my outline. I will be getting to that. I'll be introducing Fibonacci himself.
I him all the time, Derek.
I wanted to develop the subject of actually the significance of the tree. A tree and the branches of a tree with its leaves, we find come out in orderly patterns that are from the sequence of numbers. We see a lot of 3s, 5s, and 8s and 13s and that type of thing. And I wanted to bring forth what is the significance of the tree in the Bible. And we all know about the tree of life. Mm-hmm. The ark was made out of trees. We all heard of the burning bush. During the Exodus, there was a bush when the Israelites got out into the desert and they were thirsty and the waters were bitter. A tree was dipped into the waters to make them sweet, so they were drinkable. So a tree made the waters drinkable. When Christ was healing a man that was blind, during the healing process, the man testified that he saw men as trees walking. So I believe that there's something to that we're actually trees as human beings, as people, with branches and leaves and that type of thing.
I know one of the symbols in the Old Testament for humanity is wood, trees, if you will. That's really a very strong thing as far as that goes. Yeah,
I think people are like trees. If you plant them in the wrong place, they thrive, or the right place, they thrive. You plant them in the wrong place, they don't.
The Ark of the Covenant is acacia wood, humanity covered in gold, which is a symbol of divinity.
Right.
So that's really almost a symbolic representation of Christ himself.
That's right.
In the Ark of the Covenant. And there's a lot of things like that in there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And there's a lot more examples, just not mine. Trees are very mathematical. Trees are spirals. They may not be an obvious spiral to many, but they grow in a spiral fashion. Axially, they actually grow in a circular pattern. If you look at, say, if you chop a tree and you see the root of it, they actually grow in a spiral pattern.
Everybody knows about tree rings.
Yeah,
right?
tree rings.
Yeah.
And one ring of axial growth is 1 year. So there is a time type of pattern also with every year, 365 days, every rotation of the earth around the sun, you get a full ring around the tree. And also trees are spiral appendicularly. The branches, they grow, you get the straight up angle, then you go angle like this, and you get an angle like this, and it kind of curls in on itself. That's the harder spiral to see.
Okay, yeah, I never saw that before.
And if you count out from the main trunk of the tree, you'll rarely see more than 7 different branches off of the tree.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I've not counted more than 7. I don't know if that's a thing or not, but that's something I've personally observed.
Find that out. Yeah.
Now we're going to talk about Fibonacci.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Fibonacci, it's not even really his name. His name was Leonardo Pisano Bigolo. and he was born in 1170 AD. Very, very old, long time ago.
So that's when I thought it was later than that.
Fibonacci actually means, that's his nickname. Actually means son of Bonacci.
So that was his dad's name.
That's his dad's name, his last name. He was son of Bonacci. And then the actual Fibonacci sequence, yeah, that's what I was going to say, it's son of a Bonacci, was, he actually published a work called the Liber Abaci in the year 1202, and this is where he published the sequence of numbers that actually he saw, or in his observations, corresponded to how many rabbits occur per generation, kind of a formalized or normalized number of rabbits. With every generation you get, it's not always exact of course, but you get like an average of a certain number. They wanted to figure out why do rabbits multiply so quickly and their numbers increase so quickly, and then they had, in their studies of this, they saw that this number pattern come up. So this number is an actual real pattern of numbers. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, 89, 144, 233, and later 377. These actual numbers. And what's special about these numbers is if you add the first two, you get the third. And then you add the next two and you get the next number and the next number. So all these numbers are additive up to determine the next number. For example, 1 and 1 is 2. 1 and 2 is 3. 2 and 3 is 5. 3 and 5 is 8. 5 and 8 are 13, and so on and so forth. So that's very significant. And this pattern, these actual numbers we see a lot in nature. And that's really...
Fibonacci had a hair-raising experience.
He did.
Yeah. With hair.
And something else I learned was that the actual sequence was also discovered in India much earlier. So, as I'm going to be talking about a little bit later, this number sequence is not from Mr. Fibonacci. This number sequence is from God.
Okay.
So,
So he traced it right.
a lot of people say, well, that's not Fibonacci. That's not Fibonacci. Well, Fibonacci numbers existed before Fibonacci existed. But also from the sequence of numbers, if you take the ratios of these numbers, like 21 divided by 13, you get what's called a golden mean. And that's this pattern or this symmetry that we see in art and what we see in nature, that we consider anything that has a symmetry tends to be pleasing to the eye. So that's called the golden mean. That comes from the Fibonacci sequence, ratios of Fibonacci numbers. And there's the Fibonacci Rectangle pictorial that we can put up on the screen. With that, the reason I bring that forth is you can see as these numbers are developed, they make proportional sizes to one another to kind of give this distinctive symmetry of beauty. And I put it forth because it resembles something else that I'm going to be bringing forth later on in the presentation here, that these numbers are represented in a grid form, various sizes of squares with the numbers of by the aerial number of, like for instance here, I'll show you what I'm talking about. Like for this one here, this has a square area of 13 squared, 21 squared, and these squares are all the same relative proportions to one another as it grows in a spiral pattern. Okay. So this is similar to something else I'll show you later on in the presentation. But as I said earlier, the creator is really the source of the Fibonacci sequence. And being as such, I would expect to find the Fibonacci sequence in the creation somehow. And since I've really studied the 7-day creative pattern, I call it the creation function, I've discovered that the creation function actually can be derived or is derived by from Scripture. I actually, like a story problem, I derived an equation from Scripture that makes a logarithmic spiral pattern. And if you follow this pattern over 7 rotations, it creates a table of numbers. Every time the spiral hits the 180 degree mark or the 360 degree mark, if you take that particular digit or number that you get, you put it in a table. And if you tabulate these numbers, you get a table of numbers that corresponds to the periodic table of the elements, and I'll show the Fibonacci sequence.
That is fascinating. And, you know, I've noticed that myself when I was in chemistry, that
Really?
that type of thing exists, you know. But now, when you say that's the ratio between the atomic number and the atomic weight, is there any relationship with that?
Indirectly. I can't say no, because indirectly, because later on I'll be talking about the arc, and the arc actually is a nuclear model. I have, there is a configuration of the arc that is exactly the same thing as the heaviest naturally occurring stable element, which is lead-208. The half part, if you take the arc frame, which I'll show you, if you take half of that, it corresponds proton for proton, neutron for neutron, down quark per down quark, up quark to up quark. The numbers are the same, exactly the same. I showed you, in fact, the first dinner we had dinner, I showed this to you. That's getting a little bit ahead of the card a little bit.
Okay.
So the creation function also, with this table of numbers, I also supply the creation function table. This table of numbers, if you take their ratios, you get an approximation of E. And the further out you take the creation function, the more precise this is. It's really like an Euler summation. It's really the same thing. It's a very, very well-known common series that has a limit in E. And that's basically what the creation function is. It's nothing really new. It's kind of new because of the way I develop it, but it really is just a summation that has a limit. It converges on E.
Now, what is the difference between the creation function and the Fibonacci series? Or are they more once than the one and the same?
That's my exact next thing. Now, this creation function, if you take the number where it crosses at 180 degrees, for example, if you take the number 373, and then you take the number, the next crossing, which is at the 360 degree mark at 616. If you take and you subtract these two numbers, probably a bad example because this is a higher number, this is a higher, you'll get something like 146. I think this is actually these two here.
Okay.
And so this what I call raw Fibonacci series. This is not the Fibonacci series, but it's very, very similar. It's off maybe one number in one place, maybe two numbers in another place.
What do you think that is? You have any thoughts as to that, or?
I think I'm going to develop the answer to that as I keep going here.
Right.
But yes, I do have a few thoughts
Because I
on
wonder why
it.
you said raw, because
Yes, it's
I
not-
I noticed that went from 8 to 12 instead of 8 to 13.
Right. Yeah, it is 8. For example, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops, it
Instead
should
of-
be a 5.
Should be a 5, yeah.
8 we're good. 12. Oops. 20. Oops. 1. So this is the raw Fibonacci sequence. But if you plot this sequence against the actual Fibonacci sequence, it is R squared correlated 99.8%, meaning it is basically the same thing. I know what you're.
What I have a feeling is, we're not quite getting exactly the perfect sequence or
Right.
something.
So
It's like
I wrote
that.
this part just for Rich.
Oh, good.
This next
I need
part
help.
is just
I
for
need
Rich.
you, you know?
It's that pesky 2%. Okay? What is that pesky 2%? And that has kind of dogged me over the years, but no longer. Is that
No
dogged me?
longer?
No longer. Because I found Rich's pesky 2%.
Okay.
And this here is my solution to that 2%. We live in, and we therefore observe, a post-flood world. This world is after the ark has happened. Everything came out of the ark. Now it's populated the earth. Generations have grown. Animals, generations have grown. And here we are. We look around. We see a post-flood world. Now, I'm going to start talking about the ark. I talk about Noah's Ark, and I take just a slice of Noah's Ark in my studies, and I call that ark, that slice, the ark frame. It's kind of like taking a loaf of bread, like it was the ark, and just taking one piece of bread and looking at it.
Okay.
So with that one piece of bread,
Cross-section or something like
yes, exactly, a cross section. If you take that one piece of bread, you can see the upper deck, the middle deck,
Right,
the
okay.
lower deck. You have an aerial, you have something that's going to be 30 30 cubits tall, 50 cubits wide. Because of my research, I've been able to put the floors in at certain places in a magic spot where everything just clicks and comes together. I'll show you a diagram of that in a few slides here. But moving on here is the Noah's Ark was able to perfectly receive the creation. A couple shows ago or a couple years ago, number for number, the complete creation function, which ends at 1674, that whole 1664 goes in, 10 remains outside, and that is H2O, which is 2 hydrogens and an oxygen, which is 10 protons. What's on the outside of the ark during the flood? It's water. Okay, but that's not really the point here. The point here is that if you take half of the section, you get some interesting numbers. You get a 144, which is a Fibonacci number on the top. In the top floor. You get a 144 in the middle floor, and then you get another number which is significant to other sections of my research on the bottom floor. The top 2 floors are what's interesting, like the upper room and the middle room. Okay. Okay, so those are Fibonacci numbers. They were very, very. I thought, well, those are Fibonacci. That's only one. Until I realized if you take the whole section, which is right here. I'll show it to the audience. I'll probably put it up on the screen. You can cut this in half, and you have a 144 and a 144. Okay. Now, if you take the whole thing, you have a 288. Right. Now, I've always known that 288 is twice 144. I've always seen that, and I've always known, of course, 144 being a Fibonacci number is going to be the sum of the earlier 2 Fibonacci numbers, which is 89 and 55. Okay, so what are But it never put 2 and 2 together, or 89 and 55 together, to show that this is a Fibonacci triplet. From these 3 Fibonacci numbers, I can derive all the other Fibonacci numbers in 2 different ways. So what that means is, and plus this 144 and this 144 adds up to this 288, which is not a Fibonacci number, which is just a number. If you build this frame, this is 30 tall, 50 wide, and you put these in the right place, you get this 288. So this is the ark as it's described in the Bible. A structure that's 30 tall and 50 wide. That's all that is. If you can count the brown squares.
Each of the squares are a cubit?
Yes, it's a cubital element.
A cubit square.
That's a cubital element. So you get a 288 right from the Bible. And if you cut it in half, you get a 144. Now I get the 89 and the 55 in other parts of my research. You also have during the second and third drying phase of the ark, you get a 90-day drying phase, and you get a 56-day drying phase. So that's not the only thing, too. This also corresponds to my arc model, which I've also talked about in earlier shows. Right, yeah. You can rewatch the creation function RAE show, and you'll see this again. So, what's special about a Fibonacci triplet? Fibonacci triplet, with those 3 numbers, I can develop the entire Fibonacci series. And also, the Fibonacci triplet is self-checking, meaning if you multiply the outside numbers, which is 55 and 144, you get a big number. But that number equals the middle number squared plus 1. It's always true.
So, in other words, 55 times 144
equals
this 55 squared.
Oh, you almost had it.
What?
55 times 144 equals
whatever.
89, or I'm sorry, yes, 89 squared.
89 squared. Okay, so
plus 1.
Plus 1.
That's always true. You could do it with 1, 1, and 2. 1 times 2 is 2. That equals 1 squared plus 1. You can do it with any of those numbers. So it's a self-checking series. And I think that's really why it's so useful in nature, because if you notice some of these, the heads on a sunflower, you'll have 3 spirals. You'll have 2 spirals going like this and another spiral. it's like they're all kind of self-checking each other. It's feasible. It's a feasible design if these spirals, if the seedlets form these, grow in this pattern.
Have you thought of those proportions helps make the arc seaworthy?
I've not really thought of the seaworthiness of the arc. The arc also, the 30 and the 50, it's a 3 to 5, which are,
3 to
so,
5.
yeah. I give you that. I don't study really the seaworthiness of the ark, but the ark certainly was a boat that went on literal water that held literal animals and people.
Yeah.
So, and God designed it, so I would say it's probably the most seaworthy thing that could actually exist. But if the ark was a seed planted, and this triplet could be perfectly divided and expressed over time, meaning you take this initial full arc, which with the 55, the 89, the 144, you can express all the way down to the 112 or the 235 any way that you want. And the way I express this is that here's the answer to how do we get from the raw Fibonacci sequence to the real Fibonacci sequence.
Okay.
Right before the flood, creation in its raw Fibonacci form was dumped into the ark. Okay, now you have an ark that is structurally Fibonacci.
Okay.
It's like having several obscure glasses of water of different obscure sizes, and then having a 1 liter glass. Now these glasses are funny sizes. They don't make any sense in any of themselves.
Sure.
But then if you dump them all into this liter glass, then you have one standard liter.
Okay.
So we may have raw Fibonacci, which is in and of themselves not exactly right, but once we dump them in here, they're normalized to be Fibonacci. Meaning they'll adhere to the 288. They're going to be. And that's where I get that the Fibonacci sequence comes from the arc, or could come from the arc.
Okay.
It's feasible that from what we see here that the Fibonacci sequence is developed by the arc. Now, I'm going to start talking about Dr. DeYoung's work. I saw something from Creation Research Society, Math Matters, which I love. Math Matters, he's done all of them are good, but the two that catch my eye, one was the Euler formula, which I love, but this one here really got me because it's basically the same thing as the creation function, just restated. He talks about how leaves on a tree, on many common trees, if you look at the branch with the leaves on them, these leaves grow at different angles relative to one another based upon fractions that are developed from Fibonacci numbers. And these fractions are fractions that are taken from a full 360-degree circle. So he's using Fibonacci numbers to develop fractions of a circle, which create a rotating, continuing pattern. Okay. That's exactly what I do with the creation function. And
like this one here?
Yes,
okay.
That's what I do. This is the creation function, and as I rotate the spiral here, as I rotate the pointer with the degrees in a axial form, I'm also stepping up numbers. So I'm creating fractions. The first fraction is 360 degrees divided by 1.
Okay.
360 degrees divided by 2. So, and each of those creates we'll say 360 divided by 2 is 180 degrees, so it's half a pi.
Okay.
360 degrees divided by 3 is a third of a pi. So I keep adding these pieces of pi together. And what happens is you get a rotating spiral pattern, which is actually a logarithmic spiral pattern, actual true logarithmic. So I'm adding fractions of a circle to create a rotating continuous pattern. Yeah. That's the creation.
I never see that. It looks like a conch shell. Though,
so if you have e to the I pi power, this is -1.
Right, so that's you just stated the Euler formula. Right, you're talking about, but he just stated, like I told you, I like the Euler formula. He just stated the Euler formula.
Okay.
Which is another rotating spiral pattern. But what we wanted to get across is Dr. DeYoung also gives this really neat table of these fractions. But these are fractions of 5 Fibonacci numbers.
Okay.
1 over 2. That fraction makes 180 degrees because it's 1/2 of 360 degrees.
So I'm trying to figure out how this, he's got 1, 1, and a 2, and then he's got a 2 and a 1, and 1.
So what this for the elm, if you come here for the fraction Fibonacci 1 divided by Fibonacci 2, which is 1/2 of 360, every 180 degrees you get a leaf over another leaf. So it goes 1, 2. Then you repeat. So it only takes 2 leaves, 1, 2, to get the next repeating pattern leaf, which is at the same angle as the first one. So it's 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Sorry, 1, 2, 1. I'm looking at it upside down. So do you see that?
I see that 1, 2. Are these?
It says you got the upper, and then the middle, the lower, and then one lower.
2, and then you got.
Then you have to start upper again. Upper,
then
middle, lower. The little one here is the lowest one.
Yeah, that's confusing.
That's kind of hard to see. The other ones would probably be harder to see. I don't know, maybe easier. That's the general idea. Now for the oak tree, it takes 5 leaves. And this is really difficult to see. But these leaves they tend to grow in the bunches of the same number also. But you can check out the pictures for yourself. I'm sure that they're going to be posted. It gets really complex all the way up to the willow tree. Yeah. And also, I guess the sunflower tree, sunflower bush also has the same. It takes 13. So that's several rotations of a circle to get to the next repeating. The idea is that the next leaf after this, or the next bush after this, would be a repeating and at the same angle as leaf number 1. The pear tree, this here, it takes 8. This is probably a little bit easier to see. You have 1, and then you have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then you have the next 1, which is obviously at the same angle.
Oh, I see, but it's bigger, yeah. But
yeah, it's you can see that the 2 that are at that angle are, and the blueberries, once again, we're back to the similar 1/3, which is 120 degrees. Each leaf is 120 degrees oriented along its axial
so basically,
branch.
The long story, we're finding this sequence in all of nature is what you're saying.
Yes.
You see, that's
We
what
find it in more places in nature than we even know.
Paul says when you see the creator in his creation,
Yes.
you're showing mathematically why that's true.
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
yes, absolutely. I get more spiritual, I get more insight from the Word of God, from the Bible, as far as my research goes, which is very mathematical, scientific right now.
Right.
Physical or physics. I get more inspiration from the Word than I do from physics books anymore. It's really kind of
Wow.
turned around. I mean, I still obviously refer to my library, but
Yeah.
my inspiration comes from the Word.
We appreciate you showing us all of this,
It's fascinating.
Derek. We'll see you next time on Revolution Against Evolution.